game designer. How do you come up with a couple resumes for me? What's the process that we go through to actually recruit this person to work with you? You sending me over? We're shipping people out to meet with us. That can get expensive if they're from out of town. How does that process all work?
So I think it depends on which way we decide to go. If we are on a retained search or we are on a contingent search. It depends on how many people you're going to get at one time.
Specifics.
Retained search, we're going to set an agreement of I want to see 5, 10 resumes at a time. I want to see 5 final interviews. The whole process is negotiated with the client, so every client, like Ryan said, is different in the process. I think that we really need to sit down and determine what it is that you're looking for. I know I spend a lot of time with my clients just finding out who the hiring manager is and what that personality consists of, and it's kind of like matchmaking. So it can't just be good on paper. It has to make sense all the way around. It has to be the great opportunity for the candidate. It has to make sense as a move in their career. And then on the organization side, it has to be a good fit for your overall culture. If you're a small company, like out here in San Francisco, every person that is there matters. And so if there's some personality bad fit, it won't work all the way around, no matter how good they were on paper.
Okay. So speaking of that, and this is a question I'll just sort of throw out to everybody, how important is it to do an in-person meeting? Because also sometimes you may have a great candidate, and we dealt with this at our company. We were in San Francisco, but we were in LA, we were a startup, but there were people that were in Chicago that we wanted to get. It was going to cost us, over $1,000 to ship them out for an interview, and it gets expensive if you're a startup, and it's a tough choice to make. But how crucial is that to the decision to bring them out? And, you guys have more money than God, so you can do whatever you want. But the average.
Sure, everybody has a budget, right? Everybody has a number. But with the in-person experience, we're lucky enough to be in an age where there's so many opportunities to get as close to that experience as possible before making that investment to bring someone out. Skype is free. A lot of startups use Skype. We do video con calls. You can basically do whiteboarding with engineers, in their house, or if they, are able to find a location that they're able to, show how they develop code and how they think through a problem with the potential engineers you're going to be working with. Or if you're looking for product managers, there are multiple ways where you can engage a candidate and understand their thought process before you make. And it's less about the investment of, the cost of a flight or a hotel, more about the time investment from your team. Does your team have the ability to spend 6 hours of the day to vet a candidate? And at the end of that, if they don't work out, they're coming yelling at us saying, how do we miss this? How do we not know this is going to be guaranteed, right? And that's really where we put the focus on the investment. Is it worth our team's time to engage with this individual? And it's our job to ensure that the team wants to hire this person before they show up at our front door. The in-person really should be the last kind of check moment. But up until that point, you do everything you can to make sure, yes, this is absolutely worth everybody's time and interest to make this happen.
Talk a little bit more, because it sounds interesting, about a highly technical role, a senior VP of engineering, somebody, it's I want a new Unity developer. You were mentioning doing something where you put up a whiteboard and you're doing this a VTC. Explain that process.
So there are a lot of free tools and technologies you can use. Some we have investigated, some we haven't, but we have a pretty straightforward process. Depending on the candidate, if there is a code test they're able to participate in, prior to the initial interview, it kind of does 2 things, right? It shows the interest of the candidate. I know there are a lot of people who are super busy out there, and there are plenty of candidates who will say, I'm way too busy to take a take-home test. We found that the best candidates are that interested in the role to where they're going to do it anyway. And it's a very easy discussion if you illustrate that this is a great opportunity, we think it's a perfect fit for you. We need you to make that investment. It's free except for time. I understand time is valuable, but we generally find the most passionate developers we have take on that challenge because it's a mutual agreement of future success. And that's a huge gate in the process. That's really easy to engage in. And it's very easy to walk away from too. If the candidate says, I don't have the time, then you illustrate how this might slow down the process, what the consideration is, and you agree to disagree until a time that's better, or most of the time, the candidate is very engaged and moves forward, and things work out really well.
Christina, are you guys also doing code tests and all that? And how does that work for EA?
Absolutely. It depends on the team. If we have a test, you have to give it to everybody. That's kind of your HR log, right? So we do the phone screens. We usually screen them first, make sure there's interest. If there is, then they kind of go through a battery of other phone calls so that technically they're on the mark. They have the test done, if it's an art test or if it's a programming test, depends. When it comes to executive hires, it's a little bit different because there's so many people that they affect. So we try to make sure that they get to talk to as many people as possible. And then inviting them in, it is just kind of sealing the deal, making sure that they feel like they want to be a part of the culture. So before someone walks in from, let's say we're hiring for Shanghai and they're based in Redwood City. Well, we're in Redwood City, that's perfect, but I got to get him to Shanghai and make sure that he has buy-in from that team. So you get buy-in here, you make sure that they're sold on it, and then you can start looking at the cost of what it's really going to be.
Do you do a Skype call for Shanghai, or do you send them there?
I'll do a Skype call to make the final decision. We'll have them meet. We won't make the decision on Skype, but like George says, we have a lot of money.
They admit it.
Just kidding.
Okay, so let's talk about continuing in that vetting process. References, and how important are references, and sort of like what are the do's and don'ts on references? Because I understand there's certain things you can't call and you can't ask for references on certain people. BJ, since you got the microphone in your hand, you can start, and everybody else can jump in because it's a very interesting topic.
I mean, as an external recruiter, we've been asked to do reference checks on candidates all the time, but it's not like a proper background check. It's mostly just a character reference check.
Okay.
And, it's basically just as if they listed professional references on their resume.
Okay, Casey, what's the deal on references? Are you allowed to get references?
Yeah, absolutely. You check references on everyone, if at all possible. And really what it comes down to is, California is an at-will state, and maybe I'm pulling back or the red curtain a bit too much. But ultimately, the reference check is there as a gate for the organization to protect themselves. We're really at the state of where someone's accepted an offer, they agreed in principle to become an employee of your company, and the reference check is there for you to do a character reference to ensure that what they committed to you during the interview process is legitimate. And you can call the references, and each reference can say, I don't feel comfortable giving a reference for this person, and it's your decision at that point. I mean, if I call someone's references, it was 5 people that they trust enough to give them the character reference and they refuse to, then that's a decision myself or my hiring manager needs to make, or the company has to make of, are we going to take this risk with this individual if no one externally will vouch for them? People they've chosen won't vouch for them. Then you're generally going to walk away. But
What point are you doing the reference check?
Generally after I actually ask the candidate when I'm allowed to check the references. I leave it up to them.
You check with them first, and may I call this?
Oh, absolutely. I would not go higher.
Everybody?
Than that.
General?
I mean, some people might, you've heard of it happening, but it generally goes very badly for the recruiter and it damages your reputation because you're putting them at risk.
Can I get a reference from EA if I want to hire somebody who worked at EA? Will you guys give references out?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't been told not to, specifically.
Some people there are some companies you call and say, well, I'm sorry, it is our policy not to give references.
Well, internally, a company can only give so much information. So on a job application, those references that are listed from that candidate are going to be people that are going to sing their praises. The candidates know better than to list a reference that would be a bad reference. And there is no such thing as a bad reference because legally, if this person has worked for you, you can't say anything negative about the person. You can verify dates of employment, what the position was, and what the wage was. And
What about they were just terrible?
legally, you can't say that. On an internal side, legally, you can't say that. So from plugging the external recruitment team here, this is another great reason for high-level positions why you want to use an external recruiter. Yes, your internal team is going to do reference checks, but we're going to do additional reference checks. And when we ask for references, we can ask, I would like to speak to somebody that you worked for, somebody that worked for you, somebody that you worked alongside of, a vendor. We can get a varied level of references and we can ask more candid questions because of the legality issues that we're just allowed to
Can you ask, let's say I give you 5 references, can you say like, well, I want to talk to people he has on list, but I see all these people on LinkedIn that they're connected with, do I know, can you just call them up? And do you do that?
It happens in the industry all the time, and it even happens internally with the companies, you know. Hey, this guy works over here. Did you work over there? Can you call somebody and see, you know, how it worked out? I mean, essentially you can get information that way, but it's really hard to make a hiring decision based on that information
We
because.
don't want to be quoted.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Don't ever burn a bridge. That's all I'm saying.
What
Always
do you
make
mean?
sure-
So, I would recommend never putting a reference down that you know that person's going to be a poor reference. But if you know, I mean, EA is 13,000 people. It's possible that you've worked with someone at our company. So, if you have, maybe make a mention, and that's always one of our interview questions. Do you know anyone who works here? Do you know anyone who used to work here? What's your opinion on us? You know, I mean, there's lots of fun things you can learn about someone, but people talk. I mean, that's just the human way, and we want to make sure the cultures match. So I'm not going to write down who said what and then give it back to the employee that we're trying to hire, because they can go sue the company in which that said that. That's why we're never supposed to really give a reference. So always do your best. Make sure you don't leave in a bad way. Always try to make things a little bit better if there was a bad situation, because if that reference comes back, you want to have a reason for why it happened. I mean, things happen.
What's the most important thing that you look at? Is it the CV or is it the LinkedIn profile or something else?
All of the
When you're looking at, you know, new people.
So for me, I know that when I'm going after an executive, and I've had to hire GMs and executive producers and CTOs, and you know, I look at their LinkedIn profiles. That's easy. It's right there. But I also do what kind of interviews have they done? What are some stories that they may have said, or what's been out there? And it's very interesting what you can find. I mean, there's lots of fun stories in the game industry specifically of things that went, wow, that went wrong. So it's a great opener, like, oh, I read about that article that you did. But it's also when you're looking at executive hires or trying to find people, their LinkedIn is great, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So you want to be able to know the person, especially when you're reaching out to them passively. And getting to know them and seeing if they're going to be a right match. So LinkedIn's great because it just shows who you are, who you follow, and that's another thing. If you want a job at a company, follow the company. Know about the company. I'm just saying, because even if you're being recruited,
Do you check that?
oh my gosh, yeah. I want them to know who we are. And some people, well, most people know who EA is, but when I've worked at other companies, on the external side or the internal side, you want to know that they are interested. When I hired for IGT, do you know who IGT is? Well, you can Google IGT.
Yeah.
They're kind of big in the casino side, but do you know who they are? Do you know the players? That's important to me as a recruiter to hire you in on the internal side. Why do you want to work here? It's not just oh yeah, Monster had a job opening and I applied. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. It's like not needed.
Casey, what about should your resume match your LinkedIn page exactly? If you notice it's like that's weird. It's like something doesn't match there.
It depends. It doesn't really matter to me necessarily. Generally, it depends on the candidate. You know, sometimes they lead with their LinkedIn profile. Sometimes their LinkedIn profile is completely accurate with everything they're doing, you know, as of yesterday. And others aren't on LinkedIn. They have a LinkedIn profile for networking purposes, but they don't want all of their experience out there. So you have to have a conversation, and it's an easy conversation. I generally ask, you know, which is the best representation of your background? Which would you prefer me to lead with? Your LinkedIn profile or your resume? And we kind of run from there.
All right, let's talk about, again, we're going back to the Las Vegas Whaling Company. We're actually a real company, but it's a good name. BJ, BJ and I just did this, so I'm going to ask you to talk about your experience at NHN in setting up a brand new company from scratch and setting up all the systems. So it's like JobVite, these recruiting systems. We built it into the website. What like someone out there? I don't know. Anybody's starting up a startup. What do you do?
Right, so first obviously you have to...
How much is it going to cost? We need to know numbers. That's really important to me.
Half your paycheck. So first you're going to start up by setting up a game plan, figuring out what your strategy basically, where you want to hit for what and why. I basically go and break it down. What tools are going to be most valuable for your hires? Obviously there's LinkedIn, and are you going to get a LinkedIn recruiter seat, which is extremely expensive, and then you're going to go negotiate with them to try and get the best deal. Things like that. JobVite, JobScore, which one? It's typically
What
just
do you recommend? Just go through.
I like JobVite, but it's typically just a personal preference. They all kind of do the same thing, right? I mean,
What do you guys use?
I think job. This one. I prefer JobVite, honestly. I think it gives you the best value and the most expansive tools out there. Really.
Anybody else?
We have an internal system, it's an MGP, and then we have some other fun things too, but externally we use LinkedIn and Connectifier and TalentBin, whatever we can use. I mean, we have access to everything because of our size, and depending on the location, we can really try anything because people like to have our business and sort of
Right.
thing. So it's nice that they give us a chance to try them out. I mean, we've done the monsters, we've done job bites, we try a little bit of everything to see what's the most successful, so we try a little bit of everything.
Ryan, let's a few minutes left. Let's sort of. How is it? I just lost my job. How do I get hired again? And how do I get your attention?
Well, first
I
of
lost
all,
my job two ways. I lost my job because they laid off our division, and I lost my job because I did a crummy job.
right. So chances are, if you're reaching out to me directly after you lost your job, we've probably worked together in the past, either on networking or on job hunts before. My first question to you would be, what happened? And then I would get your end of the story. And if it turned out that you got laid off, that's always a pretty acceptable circumstance. And sometimes these even happen after 1 month of working at a place. We've seen that happen before. So what we do when we submit all our candidates to our clients is that we write a little bit of a write-up that we call a sizzle that will include some highlights about the candidate, maybe some things that aren't necessarily on the resume, and if they've had a little bit of jumpiness in their resume, which is generally speaking a red flag, we'll outline for the client off the bat the reasons why they left those companies. And that way we kind of beat them to the objection, and then the client can't make any assumptions. If the person got laid off, they can't look at that resume and say, oh, 8 months, 6 months, 7 months, this person obviously isn't a loyal candidate. We can counter that objection on the candidate's behalf before the client has any time to worry about it. If they got fired, I would probably figure out the circumstances in which they got fired. And I think it's up to myself to make the most well-informed decision as to whether or not I want to present this candidate to my client. It works both ways. I have to represent my client in the same way that I represent my candidates. And if this person is going to be someone who's going to jeopardize my client's organization, it's up to me to decide whether or not I want to present that person.
Casey, do you hire people that got fired?
Did you ask, do we hire people to get fired?
No, do you hire people that have got your experiences and hire people that got fired from their job because they did their job loss?
Absolutely, and especially in the game industry, it's such a project-driven business. It depending on which direction the project shifts, a person might not be a good fit anymore. Like you think, especially if they're a creative focus and the project shifts the creative focus and their skills are you just can't utilize them as the project moves forward and they get let go. It's understandable. Again, it's about investigating the story and getting their side of the story, and then if they move through the process and you check their references and those stories match up, it's not an issue. You would not just reject somebody outright because they said they got laid off unless you knew why somehow and you avoid it.
So I don't know if there's more candidates in this room or clients in this room, but I think everybody can be on one side or the other at any given time. So please take this message outside of this panel. Let's not wait till that happens to connect. Let's build these relationships now. That's when you're going to have the best strategic partner in a recruiter. I mean, yes.
When you're employed.
When you're employed, or
Don't
when
need
you don't think you need a job, you can be perfectly happy doing what you're doing. And if you wanted to tell me that the job you're doing now is the job you're going to do for the next 25 years, barring no external circumstances, then that's great. But you don't know what's out there if you're not open to it. So just make the connections. That's kind of what we're here for. We want to introduce these opportunities. It might be something that you never even knew that you wanted. Like when I went from internal HR recruiting to being an executive casino host for operations, I had no idea that I was ever going to spend the next 6 years of my life doing that. But it was just an opportunity that I was open to. And so it's kind of what I'm asking on that side as
So
well.
maybe everybody takes, so how do I, as a candidate, let's say I am gainfully employed already, how do I get in touch with you to say, hey, by the way, maybe next year I may be looking for a job, I don't know. Because sometimes it's hard, it's like, email's gonna bounce, I can't necessarily, maybe I don't have your email directly, there's no job specific on JobVite as opposed to like a very specific, there's not a specific job I'm applying for, I just want you to know about it.
In my experiences, that doesn't happen all that often if you're gainfully employed and passive. Generally speaking, we're going to have to open the door to that relationship. But there are people who are very talented, not looking to move at all, who do understand the value in having a relationship with a recruiter, whether it's in 5 months or 2 years. So chances are they'll let us know, hey, I'm not looking for anything, I'm happy right now, but maybe there's a chance I'll be looking in a year, let's set up a conversation. So, we'll talk to them, qualify and build up that relationship, and then it's up to us to make sure that we keep those connections fresh, and we're reaching out to this person, even once every 2 months, just to build that rapport and make sure the relationship's strong. Then if you've, established their trust, then they'll come back to you and say, hey Ryan, I'm ready to start looking around. And then the candidate went from being a passive candidate to an active candidate, and you can see if you have any appropriate jobs for that person.
Anybody else on that?
Yeah, well, so typically for me, like, I reach out to all kinds of people, but I have a lot of people come to me, and a lot of people come from referrals. I typically tell people, give me lead time if you're looking for work, and the best way to communicate with a recruiter is not just pick up the phone and call them usually. I know a lot of them do that to you, but the best way to get in touch with them is via email. Give them a chance to schedule a time with you that is mutually agreeable. For me, and our company, we're all about the long-term relationships, and we have long-term relationships with our clients and our companies, and we like to help people as well. So it's all about making the right move for the candidate, and we try and help people do that. And I think helping people is why we all do what we do.
How do I get in the door at EA?
I'm sorry.
How do we get in?
Link in with me, talk to me, reach
You would
out.
take a LinkedIn
Absolutely.
invite from somebody who,
Absolutely. I always accept LinkedIn, but they may not reach out to me and say, hey, I want this job, but sometimes they do. My email address is on my LinkedIn page. You can email me directly. You don't even need to link in with me. And if I saw a job and I'm really interested in it, and I'll take a look at their profile, and if they don't match, I'll say, gosh, you don't match. Well, why do you think you are a good fit? And they might tell me 20 things that aren't on their LinkedIn profile or on their resume that they've done, more on the passive side, and they could be a match. So I have no problem introducing anyone to any job that's on our site. And if it's really a good match, I'll interview them and take the time to introduce them to the right people. So we have that. But it's making friends with recruiters and talented people within companies that you want to work is the key towards where you want to go. And introducing yourself and really developing relationships with the recruiters that you work internally, like with BJ, with all of you, if you're placing, making those strong relationships throughout your career is so important, because you never know when you're going to be without a job. You just don't, because you don't know what the reporting is going to be like. EA's is really good, so if you want to work at EA, you can send me a note. But it's an exciting time, but it's also a scary time. So I think always being ready, making sure that your LinkedIn has kind of a skeleton of what you've done and what you've been a part of, but then also have your resume always kind of ready to be updated, either when you all call them or when we're ready to hire you. I think it's important to keep those relationships up.
okay, last question. The crazy video. Was it worth it? Tell these guys really briefly what it was and did it pay for you guys?
So Kickstarter released a video in August of 2012 before I joined, and I really put us on the map. You can look it up on YouTube, it's fantastic. So at the time the video was released, Kickstarter had about 180 employees. By the summer of 2013, we had close to 500, so the video did a lot for us. it says, we're here and we're talented and we want you to be a part of it. And that was great for us.
How much did it cost to produce?
I don't have the exact numbers, but it definitely paid for itself.
5,000?
Hmm?
5,000?
More than that, I know, less than a
10,000.
billion. More than 100, less than a billion, but
It cost them 15,000. All right, anybody have any questions? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions.
I'll just, exclusivity. So I've got 3 jobs I need to hire for. Can I get all 3 of you guys going for it, or are you going to lock me into an exclusive deal? Because I'd rather have all 3 of you out on contingent searches trying to hire C-levels. That's all I've done.
I'm sure all of us would work on a contingent search if we qualify the jobs with you. So, I mean, we have to figure out that it's mutually beneficial to us as well. So it has to be worth our time to work it contingently.
Is it exclusive? Can I work with Ryan and can I work with you all at the same time? Or does it have to be?
So isn't that, no, so you don't have to work exclusively with any one of us, and that's really how the contingent search works. Retained searches work that way as well. You don't have to work exclusively with one company for a retained search, but since you're paying somebody, you're probably only gonna work for one. Anybody?
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice?
Let's meet in the
Okay.
back.
Thank you guys, very good.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.